The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Spouses Talking Houses with husband and wife real estate team Jennifer and Brian Frost. Everything you want to know about buying, selling, investing, and owning property. So let's get real about real estate.
Some of the things that I love is the moldings, the different woodwork that you see, and the different moldings. I'm not always a fan of the wallpaper, but sometimes I come across. I really love that. What's that grass wallpaper?
Yeah.
There's a name for it,
Grass
but anyway,
wallpaper, yes.
grass paper, something like that. I'll think of it after, but I love that, and I really like just in general all of the natural woodwork and the wide pine floors. And I'll get excited about finding a little, the hand-hewn nails, the handmade nails that don't even have a little top on them because it's before they were mass-produced. And porches. I get very excited about porches. Yeah.
That's nice. I like your comment about the woodwork. Again, we do the things we know how to do. Sometimes we think the colonists were simple, and in some ways their life, the circumstances dictated a simpler life. Or we didn't have Bluetooth or cell phones, but we could make molding.
Yes.
And we could dress it up. And of course, those old moldings, before Civil War specifically, those are made with block planes. Start with a piece of wood and start cutting a shape.
Sure.
And then a second plane. So when you go in that house and you see that detail of 5 or 6 different shapes or layers, I think about that man is all day cutting that with hand tools.
Yeah.
The other one I find fun.
That's because there was no Netflix.
That's right. The other thing I find fun is two things: floor finish and ceiling finish or plaster. And our idea of what's antique is different. When I was a child, my dad hired a plasterer, and he wanted it to look rough. The guy thought he was crazy. So he left trowel marks because that was my dad's perception of what a colonist would have. Right. No, they made perfectly smooth plaster ceilings because they knew how to plaster, and they liked that. Right. Same with floors. The colonists painted the floors.
Right, they did.
There wouldn't have been a colonial. You would walk in, the floors would all be painted. When was the last one you saw painted? No.
None.
We stain them. We want that wood to have that wood tone.
Yeah. I also really like butler's pantries. I think those should come back in style. I remember them being taken out of my great-grandparents' house when they redid their kitchen. Yeah. And now because of the open concept and everybody's in the middle of our kitchen, I would like to have a place to hide stuff.
Well, that's it. Two rows of cabinets.
To hide stuff. I think that a laundry chute would be something that would attract children to mischief, but it's so cool. What's that dumbwaiter thing?
Oh, dumbwaiter, yeah.
Yeah,
we were poor people, at least the neighborhoods I inspect in. I don't see a lot, but yes, a lot of homes did have the dumbwaiter, so we could move items between floors, and it would just be a cable.
Right.
Get a pulley cable actuated box in the wall.
Sure.
That you hope your child can't fit in because Mom, I rode the dumbwaiter.
And every now and then you'll go into a walk-up third floor and you'll see that there's just the rough flooring, and then on top of it is a linoleum rug.
Yes.
They cut a piece of linoleum.
Yeah. It's funny how those things may survive.
Yeah.
Sometimes in Manchester and Nashua, where I work a lot, for many years, a lot of those 3 and 4 families were one family. It would be grandma and the in-laws, and that's kind of different today. But I don't think families live quite like that. But I've inspected a number of homes and of course, grandma goes to the 3rd floor because the young kids, I don't want to inconvenience them. So she moves upstairs after grandpa dies to the 3rd floor. The kids raised on the 1st floor. Grandma passes away. They close the door because they don't rent to strangers. I come in 20, 25 years later, and you open that 3rd floor apartment, and they go, well, it's a little rough up there. And it looks like grandma has just had her tea. Yeah. It'll be spotless. Wow. And I've seen old appliances and personal belongings. And She died in,
that's so funny.
in
And now
72, we closed the door.
And now we turned 40 and we're afraid of stairs.
I know.
Well,
again, we know our parents always make sacrifices, so I just imagine that 75-year-old grandma, no, I'm fine. I'll take the third floor apartment.
We put a tin ceiling in our kitchen, a modern one, but I love the old tin ceilings too. And I always see them painted. Were they generally painted from day one, or was that something that came into style?
I'm not sure, but I think they were painted. We tend to like paint. Again, we like the things we could do. So we always had color. We always had color. So, again, we might not have a telephone, but we have paint. So let's dress it up. Let's make it. Those are beautiful.
Yeah, the black and white photos don't really let us see how colorful the past was.
Yes, that barn was red.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that barn was absolutely red. All right, I have a few more questions, but before we get that, I just want to see if Brian could give us a market minute.
Sure.
Sponsored by Real Value Appraisal.
Okay. I'm just going to give you some recent statistics. This is actually activity over the last 7 days or the last week in Rockingham and Hillsborough counties.
Okay.
There's been 207 new listings.
I told you.
And this is including residential homes and condos.
Yeah.
So 207 new listings.
So that's about 30 a day.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a great number. 378 went under contract in the last 7 days.
In just those two counties?
In just those two counties.
Okay.
So business continues to happen.
I told you I was busy.
Right. And another 224 closed in the last 7
and this is generally not a big closing week, because usually the last week of the month is the busy closing week. Yeah.
And we're now allowed to do open houses again, traditional open houses as of, I believe, the 16th. Anyway, last week. 220 open houses occurred during that last 7 days.
And I was wondering if people really would start doing open houses right away.
Yeah, I mean, those numbers are showing me that we're likely going to come back very strong from this. I mean, I can give you some more statistics for just Londonderry if you want.
All right, tell me about Londonderry.
Sure. Londonderry is the town in which we live in. It's a fairly small community, about 11,500 people. But anyway, I
thought it was 20,000 people. Oh, you wrote it down.
All
right.
See, you're
okay,
wrong.
He's got to be right.
Yeah,
okay.
Derry's about 32, 33, I think, or maybe 35.
Okay.
Anyway. I can just remember a couple of months ago when I'm looking at the statistics, and there was 4 or 5 houses on the market in Londonderry.
Total,
right?
Yeah.
10 new listings in this last 7 days, 19 under contract.
All right, so the buyers are still acting fast.
And another 7 closed sales just this past 7 days.
Just this past 7 days.
So the market is looking up.
Once again, if you have a house to sell, please call us. If you're looking to buy a house, please call us. If you have any real estate questions, you know where to get us. This is what we're here for. In the meantime, I had another question for you, Dave, which is, we're talking about paint, and that is lead paint, is it not?
Yeah, very important. Very important, very relevant when we talk about older homes. As most people know, we used lead in paint for decades and decades, and then discovered that there were hazards to lead. It was hurting us.
Yeah, and it still is to some extent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, tremendous problem, because we have, just because of the sheer number of older buildings. One thing I find that many of my buyers are a little confused about is kind of the eradicate of the lead leaving the market. Lead was recognized as a health hazard probably in the 1950s, and even in the early 60s, the powers that be said to the manufacturers, listen, less lead.
Right.
In 68, the law was passed that said no more lead in paint, but we can sell out of stock. So it's on the shelf. So a lot of people come to me and they go, oh my God, I bought my house. My house was built in 1976. I know there was lead paint until 1978 is the number that people always use as a guideline. And I kind of have to tell them the story and say, most houses, even 70s houses, very, very little lead.
Right.
Because it was a known hazard, and most of that lead by 1970 was out of paint. And then if we drill down in a lead risk assessment, in terms of we're talking about residential homes.
Sure.
And we look at, well, not do you have lead paint or not, which is one question, but what's the risk to you as a homeowner? We find that the lead risk tends to come from 3 or 4 very specific areas. Wooden windows, moving up in wooden frames.
Absolutely.
Woodwork below chair rail level, paint in poor disrepair where it's clearly peeling, flaking, cracking. The hazard is, again, if we breathe or ingest that lead. The other thing is, as a population, if Brian and I go renovate a whole house and we don't have a safe practice, we could be harmed. But most of the time, the risk is around infants 10 to 24 months.
Right.
So again, what I try to do is help educate my buyers. It's not that lead's good. It's that let's see, A, do you have it? Where is it? And then what's the assessment? What's the assessment of your risk? And then what I always encourage people, we have access to information today. Go on the internet, take a half an hour. Even as homeowners renovating, updating things, it's not that difficult in most cases to use lead safe practices.
Yeah, and if you hire a painter, you can get one that's lead paint certified.
Absolutely.
I know in Massachusetts that there's courses that homeowners can take.
Absolutely.
To learn best practices. I'm not sure in New Hampshire if that's the case, but like you said, we all have YouTube right now.
Yeah.
The main thing is that if you buy an older home, I would treat any paint as if it had lead. Why not just take the precautions?
Common sense.
Yeah. Exactly. And again, different ways to deal with it. For example, doors. Don't sand your doors. There are companies that will chemically dip them.
Encapsulate.
You take they strip it.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Strip it. You take your 5 doors and you take them down. And a lot of times the woodwork, unless it's very ornate, if you really have a significant lead concern, sometimes it's cheaper and easier to retrim or replace that woodwork.
Sure.
Right. Right.
And the fact is, those wood windows, even without lead, most of the time they should go. I chuckle. I know it's not my wallet, but Mr. Customer, there's a bigger reason than lead that this window's letting air through. You just need a new window.
Right.
I would tell you that my professional opinion in the residential marketplace, lead is very manageable in most cases.
Yeah.
People come in with a lot of concerns and should, but when you understand the risk, they often don't prevent you from having a healthy, safe home for you and your family.
Yeah, just you need to be well informed. You need to protect your kids, your pets, yourself, and you don't want a bunch of lead paint flakes going into the soil and that sort of thing. We mentioned the octopus furnaces having asbestos around them, and I still sometimes see asbestos-wrapped pipes.
Yeah. Again, similar but different than lead as a risk. Asbestos is dangerous if it's, the term they use is friable. If it is breaking up or becoming airborne, the fibers will hurt you and hurt you fairly quickly. Often removing that pipe insulation is much more dangerous than leaving it.
Right.
Where most of that's gone because people have been concerned for so many decades that a lot of it has been removed. I find very little. But actually the professional recommendation of the pipe insulation specifically on steam pipes is to wrap it, not to move it.
Right.
Let's cover it.
Right.
It's good insulation. Let's leave it because removing it is the dangerous part. Lead, asbestos in ceiling, as long as you're not sanding your ceiling, not a hazard. People often come to me, Dave, I'm very concerned about asbestos or these other things. Well, yeah, ceiling paint, sometimes textured ceiling, 20% can have asbestos in it. Old linoleum. A lot of old linoleum.
Right.
But again, typically it's inert. As long as you're not breaking that stuff up and creating fibers, it's not a hazard to you.
Yeah, cover it. Yeah.
And those asbestos shingles were like the precursor of vinyl siding.
Yeah.
That was the siding to get if you wanted it to last forever, right? and I still see a lot of it that's very intact.
Yeah.
But that's a big question people have.
As long as you don't break it up in a barrel. And you know what I tell people, the styles change. Sometimes you don't want that style.
Right.
But it doesn't peel and it holds paint like crazy. So having been someone who all have painted our houses, listen, you don't need 2 coats. You're going to love that siding when you put 1 coat and it looks so beautiful.
I think the tough thing is, though, if you buy a house that has those very large asbestos shingles, is if you need to replace 1 or 2, where do you get them?
You can order them without the asbestos. Almost all of the historic building parts, clapboards that are odd sizes, different shingle shapes or materials, your building center can usually order you a modern replacement. It won't have asbestos in it.
Well, that's good.
But again, that's the other thing. Sometimes I see 50s houses with odd-sized clapboards.
Right.
You can get them. You're going to pay a little bit of a premium to special order them, but we can match most modern, most historic materials.
What about if we look at a house and it's got a dug well?
Again, great question. Dug wells can provide beautiful soft water. A lot of our wells have a lot of minerals in them, often not harmful, iron, manganese, just minerals in the ground. They can cause some aesthetic problems, maybe staining or things, and sometimes contribute to a hard condition where your soaps don't work, but often those shallow wells produce really beautiful soft water. Capacity is the concern. When you're not digging deep in the ground, you don't have as much water in your well. And the other thing is that your surface well or dug well is also more susceptible to seasonal changes in water, whereas your modern drilled or deep well tends to pull from deep enough in the ground that a dry month doesn't affect it.
Right.
I guess this is Yankee engineering, Brian and Jennifer. I've inspected thousands of dug wells, and if you still have a dug well, chances are it works pretty good.
Right. Why would it still be there?
Because water is such an essential need that even though a modern well, I mean, today it's maybe $7,500, $8,000, 25 years ago, a little less than that.
Yep.
If you had a problem, you probably have drilled, my experience says you've probably drilled a well.
Right.
Now, when we have 3 or 4 dry months, does one more well, dry out? But again, I found in most cases the dug well will serve, if it's there serving a family now, it generally will continue to. I would say one thing that I mention to people is you need to be careful about surface contamination.
Right.
Bacteria.
My neighbor penned his goats. And he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
And he said, Dave, can you help me with some water testing? I said, well, of course you have bacteria in your dug well.
Yes, yes.
Right,
your goats are 30 feet away. So sometimes just common sense.
Right. Yeah, that would be my concern, is it's not lined and it is open to any groundwater type contaminant. If you have a dug well, can you do something to disinfect it without having to drill a whole new well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, in the old days, because people would know that sometimes that well could be more subject to runoff or contamination. People would go out and disinfect their well. Camp people do this all the time. They go up to the camp, they pour a quarter thing of bleach in and run it through, which disinfects it. There's, as you're probably aware, there are 2 kinds of bacteria. One is an indicator of potential problems, coliform. It doesn't typically hurt you. That's what we find most of the time. Our other bacteria, our other bacteria is our more dangerous, our E. coli is our more dangerous, or basically will give you flu symptoms.
Sure.
But the solution to that, again, much like we can solve that wet basement, we can make that dug well sanitary. We can put a cap, we can put a cement collar and a sealed cap on the top.
Okay.
And that goes a tremendous way to stopping potential contamination.
All right. Sure. Excellent. Which also brings me to cesspools.
Yeah.
Let's dig a pit in the ground,
right?
Yeah,
that's what a cesspool is, simply that.
Yeah.
Today, of course, our septic systems today, most of them have a holding tank of some sort and then some type of distribution or leaching area, and there are a number of different styles. But there was a point where we did what we would call cesspool, which was a big pit in the ground, and it would leach to the extent that the ground below and around this pit could absorb it. The short answer on a cesspool is obsolete and not able to handle the needs of a modern family in most cases. So if you're looking at a house with a cesspool, you should probably be thinking about a septic system.
So when I started in the mid-'80s, I would see homes that had cesspools. I can't remember the last time I saw one. So I'd say over the last 30 or so years, they've gradually been replaced and upgraded.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, a couple things that have happened in the last 20 years is we're still a little live free or die here, but New Hampshire said, listen, we have people contaminating the soil, and we need to stop this. So they stopped what was called like-kind repair.
Right.
About almost 20 years ago, they said, you can't repair your cesspool. You not legally. You can't repair your dry well. You now need to meet a modern standard. And so what we see now is reflective is that our home buyers don't have as many of those concerns because these systems have been updated.
Right. So what do you see come up as common inspection issues when you're looking at these older homes?
Antique homes, three areas. Electrical concerns, because we've gone often from no electricity through 2 or 3 generations of different types of electrical services and devices. And I don't often find things that are like, run, the house is going to burn down, but very rarely do I come out of the inspection without a few recommendations.
Sure.
To, again, tighten up here or there, make particular areas maybe a little safer in that way. The other one would be chimneys and venting. Those 8 fireplaces are beautiful. I'm sorry to tell you, none of them are safe to use today.
Right.
And the restoration of those can be expensive. Typically, what people do is you fix 1 or 2, and you use the others decorative. Are we really going to burn in all 8?
Right.
No. So again, it's one of those things. Chimneys are a funny thing, we think, and fireplaces. Well, what do you mean? It still looks pretty. Well, 250 years of use, and you might need a rebuild too. And then the last one would be energy. And energy is broad. It can have to do with both your central heating system and how it's designed and laid out in your home, but also the levels of insulation.
Yeah, how tight the house is.
How tight the house
windows.
is.
Right.
Yeah. So
windows.
I mean, there's a lot of subsystems when we talk about energy. But now again, we're in the golden age of home improvement. There's so many ways to address, for example, the energy, to improve your heating and cooling systems, to add insulation, to seal and weather strip. We can make these houses significantly more efficient. And we also, as you're probably aware, have a program, New Hampshire Saves,
right.
NewHampshireSaves.com, sponsored by the utilities. Yeah. And they work with a lot of energy companies and insulation companies. And I would urge all home buyers that are concerned about energy to always start there.
Sure.
When I think about an older home, I think about maintenance. As you just mentioned, some of us as we get older need a little bit more nips and tucks.
Yes, we do. Well, the sheer volume of wood.
Right. Yeah.
Wood needs maintenance. Again, I'd say don't be scared. A good paint job will last 12 to 14 years. The problem is nobody wants to do the good paint job.
Yeah, they don't want to do it right. Yeah. They just want to slap it up there.
Because that first one is expensive. To take that old paint off, it is expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But again, completely fixable.
Yeah.
Sure.
What about horsehair plaster?
Again, it isn't something you'd want to eat or breathe. And it has a lot of nasty. The horsehair was just a filler. We're trying to put volume into this as a filler. I think oftentimes people will drywall over a lot of the plaster, but there's some really great and effective ways to repairing plaster is not especially difficult.
Okay.
And again, it's 6 of 1. Sometimes a contractor feels, well, I can put that 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch sheet, and I can make. And again, the other thing is, plaster is going to be wavy. Well, let's back up. What happens in the old house is it cracks, so I skim it. And it cracks 20 years later, and I skim it. So we get bubbles and lumps. Or like in my home, if you look along the beam, it doesn't look level, or it's just because it's like a peanut butter sandwich. We keep buttering the peanut butter. So your contractor knows you want to be happy, so they often cover it so it looks really sharp.
Yeah.
But physically repairing the cracks and repairing that plaster, if you don't mind the character of it, not difficult.
So that brings me to there seems to be trends with the buyers and the desire for an antique home. Like there were definitely times when it seemed like anybody who wanted an antique home wanted it in as original condition as possible. They didn't want it, quote unquote, bastardized, and they wanted to bring it back to its original glory. And then there were, and they didn't want to buy anything that had already been restored or remodeled. Now I tend to see people will appreciate an older home if it has been not only preserved, but also updated. Rooms have been opened up and, more light has been let in and that type of thing. So can we talk a little bit about preservation versus renovation?
Sure. Again, this is your home. So do with it what you want. There's no hard, fast rule. And I've been in many homes that meet both those categories. Some look like museums. I think that's a great comment is most of today's buyers, the volume of them in the antique homes, they love that exposed beam. They don't mind the wood floor, but they want to take down that wall so that they can have connection between the living spaces and the kitchen. And of course, who doesn't want a modern kitchen as well? And there's no rules. I tend to be more of a colonist, but I had somewhat of a mentor once, and I was agonizing over a bathroom remodel. And she had a beautiful, beautiful home. And she said, I do what I want in the bathroom because they didn't have bathrooms. So they didn't have indoor bathrooms. So why should I worry about what Ben Franklin? This is my personal opinion, but the only thing you can do wrong is put a deck on your colonial home. Okay.
So a patio,
California,
a patio, or a porch.
I'm joking, of course. I'm joking, tongue in cheek. But when I see the deck on the back, I go, somebody missed something.
Oh, that's too funny.
But no, beautiful.
Sliders.
I think to your point is not, and I would say to buyers regarding antique homes is, don't be scared. You can take down that wall. You can get rid of that ugly wallpaper. We can get rid of the brown.
Don't get rid of that wall yourself if you
right.
But we can
properly support it.
We can bring contemporary colors and contemporary living into this antique home and still enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Our first home was a log home, and so it was all natural wood, everywhere, and beams and the whole thing. And I remember going to visit somebody else's home that was a log home, and they had painted all of their logs, all of their beams, and it looked lovely. And I would have said, "Oh, what a sin!" But then I went in it, and it was absolutely lovely, absolutely lovely. So I want to thank you. We've spent a lot of time talking about antiques, those lovely old ladies and old gents that dot the countryside. And I hope that this will cause some people to consider looking at older homes. I want to thank you so much for joining us for Spouses Talking Houses. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time. And thank you, Dave.
Thank you for having me.
Music courtesy of the Eric Lindbergh Trio. Please visit his website at www.ericlindberghworld.com. Jennifer and Brian are licensed to practice real estate in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Brian is also a certified general appraiser in New Hampshire. They are not lawyers, accountants, home inspectors, or therapists. Real estate customs and rules may be different in your area. Each Keller Williams Realty office is independently owned and operated. The realtor name is trademarked to members of the National Association of Realtors. If you are currently under contract with a real estate agent, this is not intended as a solicitation. Views expressed on this podcast by Jennifer may not be shared by Brian and vice versa, nor are they necessarily the views of Keller Williams Realty.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.